computer is where I want it. All right, you might have to approve that.
Oh, I did. Okay, so it's got it.
Okay, perfect, cool. All right. So, Lana, I'm really excited to talk to you today about your book process. You're getting so close. Um, First of all, I will introduce you. This is Lana Wilhelm, and she is writing a nonfiction book. And she is in the process of about to do the final manuscript evaluation before you do a copy edit and get it uploaded for publication. So tell me just a little bit about your book.
Okay, so I started this journey a couple of years ago. My husband had a stroke, and I, as a nurse, had no idea what it meant to be a spouse of someone with a stroke. Medically, I knew all the things, but emotionally and as a spouse, I didn't. And so I found through trial and error how I kind of maneuvered the whole situation. And I realized that there's probably, well, there are many, many women and men out there doing the same thing. And I've always wanted to write a book, and this just provided that opportunity of something that I could share with others. So the book is basically about my journey through the process, but more importantly, not just my journey, but Rick's journey, as well as resources, tools, just helpful hints of things that I had no idea I didn't know.
That's awesome. So, and so it's for folks that are the spouse of a stroke survivor.
Yeah, it could either be the spouse or a loved one of a stroke
Mhm.
survivor. It really, and as have gone through the book, it's focused really on being on the spouse of a stroke survivor, but
Mhm.
really it could translate to any acute situation that happens to someone. Caregiving, unfortunately, is caregiving. This is
Right,
a little different depending on the disease process, but it really kind of translates across many medical issues.
right. Very good. And tell us the title.
It's Stroke and the Spouse. That is something we worked on. I don't know how many names we've had for the book, but right now, as of today, it's Stroke and the Spouse.
Right, right. I love that. And I think that was interesting at the beginning of the process that it's important to set a working title just so that you have something to call it, right? Because
Right,
that was helpful. I'm
exactly.
like, this, we'll go through a few iterations of this, but that's a really good place to start. And I think that, yeah, you've definitely gotten to the place where it tells what your book is about and how to, who the main audience for that is. So
Yep.
yeah, for like that. So what before you started working with me as a book coach, so tell me, well, first of all, you made a comment that you'd always wanted to write a book. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, is that something that's sort of been with you since you were young, or where
Yeah,
did that desire come from, do you think?
I think it came from when I first started out in nursing. I felt like there was more that I could give to people versus just physical care. And, I developed, there were so many people I interacted with and so many needs that were out there, but I never really knew what I would write about. I just had this desire to help others get through different processes. And,
Hmm.
life gives you so many experiences that you find different ways to do it that you feel like there's other people you could help. But I could never
Hmm.
really put my finger on what I wanted to write about. I
Hmm.
guess in my mind, I always thought, like Stephen King, you just sit down, you write a world-class novel, and that's it. It's really easy. It takes about a week and you move on. That's not the case.
No.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I started, really thinking about that. And I also had published a little bit in my younger years, some medical journals and that sort of thing. So I'd done some clinical type writing, but never really from the heart. It was more
Hmm.
more medical than emotional, I guess.
Hmm. And I think that that's such a key point. So, so the desire to write a book for you came from the desire to maybe help more people than you could help one-on-one or in your nursing role
Exactly.
with your life
Exactly.
experiences, which I think is the case for so many people, especially folks in the helping profession, but really people who have any sort of experience. But when there was finally an emotional connection to the topic matter, like
Mhm.
a real, not just a head connection, but a heart connection too, is when that was sort of the final push for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, when you're in the medical profession and you help people deal with things, you look from one lens. But then when it hits you at home, all of a sudden there's a second lens that you didn't know about. That, yes, all these years I was able to help people medically through it and that sort of thing. But now I was given the opportunity to go through it from a different angle, to kind of marry my medical knowledge with my experience of what had happened. And that made a huge difference because I think that was a side that I thought as a nurse, well, he had a stroke. Whew, I've been there, done that with many, many patients. I can handle this. And I was not able to handle it the way I thought I could from a
Mm-hmm.
spouse perspective.
Right, right. So before we started working together, tell me what you struggled with in relation to the idea of this book and doing this book.
I think first off, I guess the thing I struggle with the most is where to even begin, and if it's something that someone would even be interested in, or if it was
Mm-hmm.
something that, I didn't, it's writing a book is totally different than journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Journaling is for you, and I just really didn't know where to start. And I guess my goal was I didn't want to just write a book; I wanted to finish a book. And I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how to get from point A to point B, and although I thought I had some really great ideas and I thought I had, that I could do this, through the process, I realized, yes, I can do this, but it's a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's someone help guiding you.
Right, right. Well, and I think, one of the things that I tell people all the time is, can you do this on your own? 100%. You can Google and YouTube and read blogs and all of that. Can you do it? But it's going to take a lot longer. Don't you think it would have taken longer to
Oh my
figure it all
gosh,
out?
yeah. Well, you know what? If I had not worked with you, I'll be honest, I would never finish this book. I would have given up probably 2 months into it, like, okay, this is just too much. And it's going
That's,
nowhere quickly.
I need to send this recording to my client that I just got off the phone with because she was feeling that way. And I'm like, you're gonna get there. You're gonna get there. I promise.
You'll get there.
I won't let you not get there. So I think one of the things that I think is interesting that you touched on at the beginning is, or just a minute ago, when you said you didn't know where to start, which I think is really
Mhm.
common for folks if they have a great idea, especially folks that are an expert in their field, whether it's through lived experience or their profession or whatever, they don't know where to start because they have almost too much knowledge. And then the other thing that you said is you didn't know if your idea was any good. And I want to talk about that a little bit because so many people think you have, this brilliant idea in the middle of the night or while you're taking a shower, or maybe it's something you've carried along with you all this time. And then you go to try and articulate it to someone or just to yourself in the middle of the, bright daylight versus when you're laying in bed at night thinking of it. And suddenly it doesn't seem like a good idea. It seems like dumb, or you think someone else has already done this, and that really every single person I work with hits that point at some point. They either come to me feeling that way or they, will say to me in some version or another, is this idea any good? Do you think this
Mm,
is any good? And and I think you realize now, right, that we're toward the end. Like you've done beta readers and you've gotten great feedback. It's
mhm.
definitely a good idea. Are you surprised you ever doubted it, or was that just part of the process for you?
I think it was part of the process, but I think what helped me tremendously was first off sharing my idea with you. And and you just really listening to it and being like, okay, and asking some really pertinent questions, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so the goal was, I felt like the goal was not so much that you thought it was a good idea or someone else thought it was a good idea, that I felt it was a good idea. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes a big difference in your when you're writing, because then you have that confidence to write. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what made the difference for me was the workbook. Now, when you gave me the workbook to use, I was like, oh my heavens, I was ready to throw in the towel. This is just, oh, did I lose you?
Nope, I'm here.
Oh, this is just way, way too much work. And I, but it was such a good process for me because it gave me the confidence that yes, I had a good idea. Secondly, it gave me a roadmap of what I wanted. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think third, it gave me kind of a destination. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so, it's like, okay, because questions were tough. write the first chapter,
Mhm.
write the last, chapter. Um,
I just want
do
to point out
some
those are the
research.
last steps.
Yeah, oh, I know, no, but yeah,
Right.
but when we
Yeah.
did that workbook, I was like, wow. So I think that made a huge difference for me, and that gave me the confidence to move forward. I think the other thing that gave me a lot of confidence in that this was a good idea is that your honest feedback.
Mhm.
You know, like I would be talking to you and saying something, and then you were taking notes, and then maybe the next time we met, you're like, okay, remember when you brought this up? Now let's talk a little
Mhm.
bit more about that. And so it really
Mhm.
helped me to kind of keep that creative juices flowing, and
Right.
which
Well,
gave
and I
me
think it's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What'd you
no,
say?
no, no, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big part of the coaching process. And you tell me if you would agree that you share things with me and I reflect them back to you.
Yes.
Maybe from a slightly different lens, or I'm able to see it from 30,000 feet when you're in the weeds. And when you're in
Mhm.
30,000 feet, I could pull you into the weeds if we need to get there, right? So it's just sort of that reflecting it back and saying, this is what I'm hearing. Is this what you meant to say? And if so, let's explore that. I think another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the workbook is sort of that process that did it make your idea feel more real as you went through the
Oh my
steps of
gosh.
that?
Yes, it gave me the opportunity to be able to truly articulate what I wanted to happen. And I think
Hmm.
that was like, it's kind of like when you sit down and you think, okay, I'm going to write this book. I've had this
Hmm.
experience, this is what I write. And it's like, I don't know, you got this and this and this. Like I put one, oh gosh, what about this? And what
Hmm.
about that? And maybe I should put this in, maybe I should,
Hmm.
but this really kind of put it all in one place. And I tell you, it was kind of my Bible for like the first going through the first draft. I mean, I was constantly going back to it, like, okay, am
Hmm.
I am I on point to where I wanted to be? And I think the thing in the workbook that was so helpful was learning the flow. Like,
Hmm.
okay, I wrote this chapter. Does it make sense going into the next chapter?
Does it?
How
Yes.
does that connect? Because um, as as a novice writer,
Hmm.
you have a flight of ideas.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
in your mind, I'm going from an emotional standpoint. It's like, oh, well, then I go there and then I go here.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the reader can't do that because they're not
Right. Well,
in
and
your
I
body.
right, because we talked about how you're taking the reader on a journey.
Right, right,
And so that journey needs to make sense to them. It needs to be
right.
very, useful, and they need to understand how they got to the place of where they are. So I'm glad that you found that helpful. I think almost everyone who experiences that outlining process comes to love it. But do you remember when I told you you're going to be face down on your carpeting at some point
Yes,
because this is going
yes.
to be so frustrating? And I knew that because I've been through it myself, face down on my carpeting. So I'm glad that but almost everyone, well, actually everyone I work with says that it's a very helpful process. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you talked about like trying to decide like what your book was about, and I think that when we started talking, you wanted it to be a book for everyone who cares for anyone. And we talked about how it could end up being that kind of resource, um, but that I needed you to bring that idea in a little bit because writing a book for everyone gets you to the point where you're writing a book for no one, right? Did you find that to be helpful when you narrowed down and didn't have to try and write for everyone?
Absolutely. And, because it's exhausting to try to write for everyone, because, in this day and age of political correctness and everything like that, just trying to make sure you meet the needs of everyone. And you're right, I met the needs of no one. And in reality, it's a group of people that are going to experience this. And it's you know, it really needs to be focused on that. So that helped tremendously.
Hmm.
The other thing too that you brought up about, focusing in, being a medical professional, I would be like every possibility that could happen. And it's really kind of, okay, Lana, yes, this could happen, but let's bring it in. What are the real things that could happen that they need to really be aware of? There's a saying in medicine, don't look for zebras when it's a horse. And
Huh?
I was basically doing that. I was, giving all the zebra information instead of the horse.
Right.
And
Well, and oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I said,
I just thought that it was the best thing was when we decided let's talk about the person that doesn't usually have the book written for them, which is the spouse, right? The
Right,
stroke
right.
survivor. There is, the American Stroke Association, and there's so many things, but you decided you were going to write this book for the person who is their life has suddenly been drastically impacted.
Yep.
Whether it's the spouse or, like you said, another loved one. It could be a child caring for an adult parent, or a parent caring for, but it's for the survivor and the impact on the survivor, and what things they can be doing for self-care, and where they can look for resources to help their loved one, and all of that. But yeah, I think that was a really good place for you to focus. And like you said, your medical knowledge is so vast that you could write a book from a clinical perspective, but that's not what this is. It's from, you had to take that hat off, although that information is there in the form of resources and how to be a
Absolutely.
patient advocate, which is helpful to have a nurse tell you how to advocate for your spouse as well.
Yes, and like in my book, in each chapter, there's a thing says, what to ask the healthcare professional,
I love
kind
that.
of, because you're so, they come in, they spend 10 minutes, they tell you a tremendous amount of information, and then you're like a deer in the headlights. It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ask the famous, use the famous question, do you have any more questions? Did you understand that? And you're like, and so it's, I just, I kind of looked at, okay, from that perspective, what needs to be done and what things do you need to ask and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I know you said that prior to us working together, you weren't quite sure where to start, and you weren't sure if your idea was any good. So now that we're at the place where your beta reader feedback is being incorporated, and then we'll walk through these final steps, what's changed from where you started to where you are now?
Oh gosh. One, I can now say I'm a writer. Um,
100%.
versus
You're about to be an author. Yes.
versus a thinker. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest change is I feel really good about the message I wanted to get across is the message that's in my book, because I feel like when I started, what what I thought I wanted it to say, it, I it needed structure. It needed you. Uh, and
Well,
then,
thank you.
yeah, but now I'm at that point where, okay, I know who it's going to reach. I
Mhm.
know the message I want to have. I know kind of the things that I know that if I had gotten this book when Rick had his stroke, I would have been like, wow, this makes a world of difference. Where
That's awesome.
at the very beginning, what I thought would have was like, oh, isn't she a nice lady? Think her, sharing for her information, you know, that's kind of where my journey's gone from. Yeah.
Right. So you've provided that journey and that resource for readers that you wanted to provide. Yeah, I love that. And I agree that it's definitely it'll be that thing that nurses in the stroke units and hopefully in the ER and whatever can hand that survivor and say, I know we just dumped a lot on you, but now you can take this home and see what's coming next, what the next step is, what the next thing is. So
And the one thing, Michelle, that really surprised me in writing a book was the emotional journey going through it. When you have to actually put your thoughts and your feelings down on paper, and then kind of sit back and really think about, okay, this is what I experienced. What could I have done differently? What resources would I have needed? It just helps you on that journey. It really does. And I think for Rick and I, just going through this has made a huge difference writing the book. Because there's things that you're angry about, you're upset about, and all of a sudden you're writing them down, and then it's like, okay, it's there.
and it's
It's no
healing a
longer
little bit.
it's no longer here, it's there,
That's
and
awesome.
that really, I think that for me, and I'm hoping that the individuals that read the book can say like, okay, I'm feeling it right here now, but okay, she made it through. This is some tips that she had, I can get there.
Right. And that's one of the things that I have on my website, and I say all the time to people, is that I believe in the power of story,
Oh,
um, to create joy from hardship, to make peace with time. But one of the last part is to create a community of common experience. And that's what you've done. So someone reading this can see I'm not alone, because
Mhm.
the feelings, you did a really great job of capturing some of the universal feelings, some of the isolation, the
Mhm.
lack of control, the fear about the future,
Right, right, right,
the
right.
suddenly letting your self-care go, all those things, other people can see, and they can give themselves a little bit of grace, because and you've had to give yourself that grace via hindsight, and hopefully they can give themselves that grace as they go through. um,
Absolutely, absolutely.
so you're not a you're obviously a busy person. You're As you were writing this, Rick is still, he's doing great, but as you write in the book, what people see from the outside is much different than what the reality is on the inside, especially for an independent person who wants to put
Oh
that
yeah.
front up. Yeah. So you're busy with that, and you have grown kids and grandbabies that live across the country that you go visit, and that they come to visit you, and other aspects of your life. How did you make time to do this?
You know, what I did was I would set aside every morning. Rick typically sleeps in late. That's part of his recovery. And so that was my time. I would sit down and I would work through, spend usually a couple hours each morning, sometimes an hour, depending on what I had available. I
Hmm.
would work on during the first, when I was writing like the first kind of draft and getting my thoughts down. And then, you know, then I would walk away from it. I would
Hmm.
take a couple days and then come back and look at it. The other thing, once I got past through my first draft I kind of got everything down. And then it was kind of like, okay, kind of, um, what's important, what's not important. And we use the three-step method, the red,
Hmm.
green, and yellow, and that really makes a
Hmm.
difference. So there'll be times where I'm like, oh, I've got a half an hour before I have to do this, and I could like, oh, I
Hmm.
could go in, I want to change that paragraph, I want to change this.
Hmm.
Or maybe Rick was going to be gone for the day. I'm like, oh, I got the whole day to
Hmm.
myself, and maybe I'd work on a bigger project. But
Right.
you know what, I it wasn't so much that I had to make time for it. I enjoyed the time doing it because it
Hmm.
was something that was about me and my time. And
Right.
it's funny. As soon as you start that first paragraph, you're like lost in time. So that's the one
Hmm.
thing I had to be careful with. I was like, also, I'm like, oh my gosh, what?
Right.
But yeah, I think it's writing the book is not a burden. It's a release, and utilize that time. It's your time. Um, it's your opportunity to just to share you. You
Hmm.
know,
Right. And so we started working together June of last year, or was it
yeah.
April?
Hmm.
So I would say, at least based on what I know of where you are, well, so that's something that's interesting too, that we talk about. Some people think like once they start book coaching, they can't take any breaks and they've got to whatever.
Oh
And that's not at all how my process is.
no.
Obviously, you had travel in there last summer, and we took a break for that. And you've had travel. I know, been to California at least once since we've been working
Oh,
together to
several
visit with the
times. Yeah.
grandkids. Yeah, okay. And the grandkids have been here. And then I think you've also, Rick's family's had a health crisis that you, as the nurse in the family, are,
Yes.
called in to
Yes.
help some with it. So, and yet I if I'm guessing, maybe by the 1 year mark of the time we started working together, even with some of those breaks, this book is going to be available on Amazon, right? If we're probably
Correct.
on track. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and obviously you have a life, so it's doable in that amount of time. And you're not skipping any steps, which I think I really love
Right.
that. So a lot of times you've chose to self-publish because to you it's more important to get it out there than to have a big publisher, and
Right. Right. Right.
the timeline was played into that. Um, well, and actually, you haven't made that final decision yet. We're
No, but
talking
I'm
about.
kind of,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. I think I we're still kind of thinking about
You're
that.
still
But you
thinking
know
because
what
there's
though?
an academic press that might be interested, and yeah. Okay.
Right. Right. But Michelle, I think it was doable because um, we worked together. So it was
Hmm.
kind of like we had like there were deadlines. Like, okay, we would set them together, and I was like, okay, I think you can do it by then. So it kind of gave you a timeline. I think if I had just sat down to write this book a year ago, right now I would probably still be at writing my thoughts down.
Hmm.
Um, but I think having one timelines, but having some concrete feedback and like, okay, now move to here and now move to here. And the other thing too is that I think what slows a lot of people down is um, you get so caught up, like you write your first chapter, you get so caught up in wanting it to be perfect. You want every word to be just the right word and everything just perfect. And you taught me, no, 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 let's get it all down. It's the process. So if you respect the process, your life is much easier, much easier.
Hmm.
It goes much quicker. It makes more sense, and you enjoy the process versus stress. You know.
Right. Well, and I told you this, and I'm going to say it just for anyone that's listening. The biggest reason why I don't want you to edit while you're writing is that you're going to waste time on things that are going to change, and that's exactly what ended up being true. Correct?
Yeah.
Some things changed, some structure changed, and if you had gone back and polished every chapter as you wrote it, then all of that time you spent polishing might have been lost. Not everything, but some of it would have certainly been had to be redone. And then your beta readers came back with some good feedback, and you're making some changes and shifting some things around a little bit based on their feedback, which um, again, you would have wasted the time fixing those things. So yeah, I'm really glad that you followed through with that, because that's another reason why you're getting done, and in this amount of time, because you didn't spend so much time polishing stuff that might have changed anyway.
And that's a
Plus
challenge.
you
That's
lose.
hard to do. That's hard to
It
do
really is.
because
I
every
agree. Well, especially when I'm giving you feedback and telling you what needs to be fixed, it's very tempting to want to go do that, right? But what I said is print it out, keep it. My notes and feedback aren't going anywhere, but your momentum and motivation could go somewhere if we don't keep after it.
yeah.
And I think that that's the other thing I wanted to commend you for, is that when I said, like, this is not the final, because sometimes people want to rush to publication, especially if they're considering self-publishing. They would get to the end and they're like, okay, they want to run it through, Pro Writing Aid is the tool that I love, or run it through Grammarly, or have their, best friend proofread it, and then they want to get it up. And I was like, you know what? Let's take a second. You need to get some beta reader feedback, which you did.
Yeah.
That takes a while because people have to take the time to read it and give it to you. You need to absorb that. And then you thought you were ready for a manuscript evaluation, but you decided to take a step back and let's
Yeah.
digest this and talk about. And then we talked about the revision process, and you've been very methodical about that. So I think that's great.
Yeah. And I think too, the another recommendation you made was, to make and I did, do like an Excel sheet or any type of whatever works for you, but kind of, okay, what's your chapter checklist? What are the chapters? Do you have that all covered and
Mhm,
everything? And it really makes it easier because then I can like, oh gosh, yeah, I wanted to put that in this chapter, not that chapter, and just to see
mhm,
it in black and white. But you're right, the beta readers, you know, first, you're putting yourself out there to people and you're very vulnerable and it's very
right.
emotional and it's very scary to have people kind of give you feedback. And you have to almost take it in and then walk away for a little bit,
Mhm,
you know? And
mhm,
then I think what happened is that you and I could kind of talk it through like, okay, what's valid, what's not valid, that kind of thing. Because it is,
mhm,
it's like, you put yourself out there and you're like, oh, well, they don't like this or they think this. And
mhm.
it's a challenge, but it's been so helpful because it really helped me to kind of, okay, redirect like how I wanted it to flow and that sort of thing. So it's
Mhm.
worth it, but you got to put yourself out there to be vulnerable.
You really do. Yeah, that's awesome. So if folks want to, that's one of the other things we did is we talked about a platform. I love
Uh-huh.
helping my clients like think about author platform, whether they're going to self-publish or traditionally publish,
Right.
because even traditionally published authors are responsible for the large majority of their own author marketing. So we talked about a platform and your goals to sort of be a resource for spouses who are going through something like this. So you've got a website up and running now. So let's tell folks where they can find you so they can get information and updates about your book. And you'll be adding resources to that as you go. So,
Right. Yeah. So my website is www.spouse and the stroke or stroke and spouse. No, spouse and the stroke. Oh my God, I'm having a
no,
stroke
no, it's
myself.
stroking.
It's stroke, stroke,
It's stroking the spouse.
spouse, yeah.
Yeah.
.com. And it really right now it's kind of in its infant phase.
Mm-hmm.
Because, not only was I learning how to write a book, but now to how to do a website. And it's the website, it's actually very well, I shouldn't say that. It's not easy to do until someone teaches you how to do it. And now once Michelle kind of walked me through it, was like, oh, okay, this I can do this.
Right.
So that was better. But yeah, so I post. I haven't been posting as frequently yet because
Sure.
I've been so focused on the
Well, you're
book.
still
But
on the book, right?
yeah, but no, it was a great platform and it's fun. It's fun to do.
Good, good. Yeah, and I think that's the next thing we need to do is get your email form up. Or did we
Yeah,
do that
and get all
already?
that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do have an email, but yeah, we got to get that going. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So that way people can get updates, and but for now they can just pay attention to the site if they want to get updates for
right.
when your book will be out. So, all right. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything you want to tell folks?
Yeah, you know what? I think the one thing I wanted to share was that, when you start to write a book, you think you can do all this on your own, which you can, you're right. But you know, and then I think people get concerns like, oh my gosh, what would this cost to have someone do
Yeah.
this for me? And the amount that you get is so great compared to the amount you spend,
Oh, bless you.
and so, I just feel like, like I think it's reasonably priced. I think it's money well spent. But again, what you get for that fee is 10 times more than what you pay, because you not only get information, but you really get a personal relationship with someone that truly cares about what you're doing, that really is truly invested in you.
Hmm.
It's not a company that's like, oh, well, let me just run it through a computer. It's someone that's
Hmm.
really listening to you, making notes, guiding you. It's kind of like having a little bit of a therapist while you're writing your book.
Well, and I really appreciate you saying all of that. I think that part of what you're articulating also, at least what I'm hearing reflecting back here, is that
Yeah.
transformation in you as well, to go
Oh
from
gosh.
this person who's a nurse who has an idea to now a person who is a writer. You've made that
Yes.
transformation, you believe in that skill now, and we've talked about future things that you could write as well, and soon to be author, that you can put that behind your RN
Yes,
title. So
exactly. Exactly. So, yeah.
all right,
But no,
well,
great experience.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thanks for doing this.
Oh, you're
And again,
welcome.
your website is strokingthespouse.com.
Yes.
Throw that back in there. All right, very good. All right, I'm gonna hit the end